Good day. Today we're going to be looking at geometric instructions. And we've got a C-lever drawing, which you can see on your screen. That's going to be used as our example. I'll also tuck this drawing on the side of my video, so that way you can actually see the drawing and magnify up, see the dimensions, and work from there. So we're going to go through the setup process, create the drawing, we'll put a few dimensions on it, and we'll work from there. To get started, we need to choose the Start Drawing tool here in AutoCAD 2015. And as we get started, if you remember, we've got a fair amount of setup items. One of the first things that I always like to do is go across the bottom, turn off my grid. It makes my screen show up a little bit cleaner on your system. We'll also then go and do the Units command, and the Units command is under the big letter A up in the top left corner. It's under Drawing Utilities, and we're going to go to Units. You'll also see that there's some interesting things such as recover drawings here. There's also Drawing Properties, which is another tool that works with it. So the idea is that we're going to change our units. We look at our drawing, and our drawing says that we've got 3 decimal place accuracy. So we need to set our accuracy for our decimal dimensions to 3 decimal places. Whether it's millimeters or whether it's inches, makes no difference. You set the decimal precision, and you determine whether it's a millimeter drawing or an English drawing. Only at the very end, when you're actually scaling it to plot, does it have to come into serious play on whether it's been created as a millimeter drawing or a inch drawing. But in this case, it looks like it could be inches since it is 3 decimal places, and we'll work from there. Decimal degrees is set to 0, which is whole angle units. We're not going to worry about any of the other settings under the Units command. The second thing that I always check on is the polar tracking. And polar tracking, I always click the icon which turns polar tracking on and off. However, I want to choose Track Settings. And what this will do is this will give us the ability to look at all the polar track settings. And what these do is this allows me to draw in relationship to specific angles. So it'll lock my cursor in at every 5 degrees, or lock my cursor in at 10 or 15 or 18 degrees. And so the idea is that we can pre-lock our cursor at certain locations to make it easier to draw. So in today's drawing, we're going to mix it up a little bit, and we're going to say that it's 15 degrees. Why? Because I don't have any angles that are specified in the drawing. However, there are some tangent lines that are angular, but we don't know the angle of those specific entities. But I'm going to choose 15 degrees. And if I had specific angles that I needed to make, I could actually add them with the new. We're going to track orthogonally only, which is up, down, left, and right, straight up, straight down, left, right. And we're also going to be working from an absolute measurement, which is 0 based. So if you think about your mathematics class, 0 is on the right hand side, 90 rotates vertically to the top, so it rotates counterclockwise or anti-clockwise depending upon your terminology. And so you'll be at 90, you'll continue to rotate anti-clockwise or counterclockwise to 180 degrees. So the idea is that the 0 is on the right hand side, it's considered east, and it is absolute. Relative to the last segment indicates that it is an angle that has a relationship to the last entity that was drawn. And if you've got a lot of interior angles or exterior angles that you're working with, this is a great tool to use. Right next to polar tracking is our object snap settings, and this is a good time to do that. We'll also find object snap just 3 doors down, which is the other down arrow 3 doors away from polar tracking. But we want to set up the endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection, extension, and perpendicular. Again, we do these setups to make our drawing environment easier. So you might be thinking, well, why don't I set tangent up? Well, tangent and center conflict with each other on circles and arcs. when I try to draw a line tangent to an arc, it'll a lot of times pop in and pick the center instead. And so I just leave it at center, and then I use what is termed as an object snap override to help me with specific tangent locations. We'll choose OK, and that sets up our basic setup items. We'll choose layer properties, and we'll set up our layer. In this case, we'll have an object layer. Hit the enter key twice. We'll set up dimensions and center lines. Now, if you've watched my other videos, typically what I'll do is I'll select a darker orange or brown for object lines. Dimensions are usually in the blue-purple range. And center lines are typically in the greenish hue of some sort, dark green in this case. Object lines don't need to change the line type, but I do need to change the line weight to 0.5. Again, diameters. So object lines, you don't need to change the line type, but you do need to change the line weight. And we set that up as 0.5 because that's what your typical pencil lead diameter will be. Or it could be 0.7. It's your choice. Dimension lines are continuous and no line weight changes. Center lines do have a line type change, and it's not listed. So we need to load a line type called center. So in our case, our drawing itself is not gigantic. It's only about 5 or 6 inches in size. So I'm going to use half scale center lines so they show up a little bit easier for us. Select it once and load it. Select it twice and now apply it to the layer. So we also have a setup for text styles. And so when we look under annotation, under the down arrow, we've got a text style setup and a dimension style setup. So first we're going to go to text style, and these are the setup items 5 and 6. The top 4 you have to do for every drawing. 5 and 6 you usually set up when you need them, and you can do it at the beginning of the drawing or at the end. We're going to go ahead and do the text style setup now, and we'll probably touch on dimension style towards the end of the drawing. We'll choose text style, and so if we're going to put text on our drawing, we can set up what that text looks like. In our current scenario, our font is an Arial font, but you can choose any of the TrueType fonts that are listed within a Windows environment or an Apple environment. It makes no difference. As long as they're a TrueType style font, they'll work fine. Now I can control specific heights, but I always like to leave my height variable because sometimes there's impact text, title text, or text that has to be very small in stature. So you can choose the height. If you specify a height here, you don't have that control. It sets up the height automatically for you. And it's a good rule of thumb just to leave your height variable and then control that directly at the point of input. Other effects. Now some of the effects are pretty interesting. You can make text upside down and backwards. Backwards is kind of cool if you're doing t-shirt printing or if you're doing stickers, like for rear view mirrors, that kind of thing. So that way the backwards text does show up. Width factor. Width factor changes whether the text is going to be short and a little bit stout, meaning it's short and wide, or is it going to be tall and thin? So if I do a scale factor here, or a width factor of below 1, it's going to get wider and thicker. If I do an above 1, it's going to be taller and thinner. 1 is proportional in both ways. Obliquing angle. If you italicize text, you use the obliquing angle, and so we can tilt the angle of a text font. Typically it's tilted 15 degrees to 30 degrees, but you can tilt it any angle you choose with this obliquing angle. So we're not going to change anything specific. Oh, size, annotative. One of the other videos goes through annotative dimensioning and annotative text. And annotation comes down here at the very bottom of our screen where it shows 1:1, 100%. We can control what the output printing looks like for both dimensions and text automatically if we make it annotative. And when we know specific height and specific size drawings, we don't necessarily have to change it, but when we're dealing with larger scale drawings or larger drawings in itself, it's a good idea to use the annotative style, because you're not sure when you start what scale that output is going to formally be. And so it's hard to control your text size because of that. All right, we're going to go ahead and cancel out of text style, and we're going to get started. The first thing we need to do is choose our center lines. And so we change our layer up at the top here to the center layer. You saw me do that. And now we're going to pick a line and draw a vertical line segment. Now that vertical line segment's about 4 inches, which is perfect. And we're going to draw a horizontal line segment. Now I'm going to try something different. I'm not just going to draw a line anywhere. I'm going to pick the midpoint of this line and then draw it out about 3 to 4 inches. I could also grip and then move this into the center, and what that will do, using the grip tools, I can then either A, manipulate one end by picking and stretching, or I can select the center and just shift it back to that midpoint. And now I've got a fairly accurate location of where this needs to be. So now we need to offset the center line here, which is our lower center location. We need to offset the center line to get the upper right location, and to do that we'll use the offset command. We're going to offset 2.630 because that's what the drawing tells us that the offset distance is from the horizontal line above. We then have an offset distance of 1.649, and that's going to come from the vertical line over. But what did you notice? They don't touch. Again, I can grip this and extend. And I can grip this and extend. I can also grip the center and move it to the intersection point, and I can shrink this down a little bit on both sides because I don't need as big of a line. And I can zoom out, select this one, bring this one up as a smaller entity also. And so what I did, okay, that magic move there was a double click on my mouse wheel. You can zoom in and out by rolling the mouse wheel. You can also double click and it'll magnify to the maximum size of the drawing. Or if I press and hold the wheel, you notice that I get the hand, and the hand allows me to pan, P-A-N, around and shift the drawing image. So now I need to create an upper left location. Same way, we're going to offset the original 3.258, and that's horizontal, and the upper 1.779. So it's a good idea to get into the practice of using layouts, of using center lines to get started with your drawing environment. And it'll just make life so much easier than just creating it blindly. So again, using the grip tools, I stretched it and moved and manipulated. And now I've got 3 center locations, which are the 3 center points for all my circles. And so I typically work from the outside in as opposed to an inside out. Other drawing instructors have different philosophies. I'm always outside in. So I'm going to begin with the upper left-hand side here, and I've got a radius of 0.889. Well, I'm going to choose circle center radius. Why? Because it's easier to draw a circle than it is to draw an arc that I don't know where the start or end is because of the tangencies. So we're going to find the center, which happens to be the midpoint, and we're going to type in 0.889. And you'll notice that what I created was a new centerline circle, which is not what I was looking for. So to change this, I can grip the circle, change the layer, and the object will change layers. However, notice that the layer didn't change. Well, I need to select that a second time. When we selected it the first time, we were changing the object. Now we're changing the thought process. We'll use the same circle center radius over on the right-hand side here. Everything looks good. This one happens to be a 0.711 radius. And lastly, we've got a third circle. Again, circle radius. This one happens to be, again, in the middle. And it's going to be 1.067. You can see the dimension on the bottom of the drawing. It looks like a small arc, but it's easier to create it as a circle. And the reason being is because we're going to be working with tangents here. And having tangents working with us, it's so much easier to have a whole circle because you don't have to guarantee that exact location initially. So let's draw a tangent line. We're going to pick the line command. I'm going to hold the shift button on my keyboard and press the right mouse click. And that's going to pop up the tangent options and along with all the other object snap tools. But I'm going to pick tangent. Now tangent's a little bit tricky. I've got to pick the first tangency point, shift right mouse button again, select the second tangent point. Again, I don't know exactly where the tangent is on that circle, but it is on that circle, and it's going to be on this side. Now I can also pick a tangent over on this side, so you have to be careful. I can pick tangents on both the right and the left-hand side of the circle from the line location. So we right mouse click, choose enter to stop that, and we'll try it again. Line, shift right mouse button, tangent, pick the outside edge of the big circle, shift right mouse button, tangent, and just notice that there is a tangency button and I can draw a tangent to that line. If I make a mistake, I can always right mouse click and choose undo. And I can shift right mouse button again, tangent, and find that tangency point. We have one giant arc here that we have to work with. And that giant arc we're going to create with a really interesting circle command called tangent tangent radius. Another reason for using the circles, because I don't know exactly where that 2.845 circle radius is going to fall. So I'm going to pick tangent tangent radius, and we'll pick a tangent point somewhere on this quadrant of the circle. Tangent again. And now the radius is 2.845. Hit the enter key, and it's a giant circle. If I double click, it's a pretty good sized circle. It's almost 6 inches in diameter. So now I've got all the outside shape. Looks exactly like our drawing. Not really. Well, I need to trim it up. In the trim command, I'm going to select, missed it. So we're going to pick trim, select the lines, and if I miss it, I'm going to get a Windows box. And I know in the next geometric construction video we talk about Windows boxes. But it's a crossing window. That was that green one, so just be really careful. I'm going to select the outside objects here. So basically everything is selected as a cutting edge. And what that does is that gives me the ability to right mouse click and select parts of objects that I'd like to get rid of, like this part, and that part, and this part, and this part. And there you can see we have our basic shape. I now have circles that I need to put on the inside, and instead of tangent tangent radius or center diameter, center radius, I'm going to choose center diameter because that's what the dimensions are specified on the circle. So the circle center diameter happens to be 0.899, and it says 3x, which means that there are 3 of these particular circles. So 0.889. So you notice that I right mouse click there. It said repeat circle. It says repeat circle. Well, I can repeat that circle that I just created, and you'll notice that it goes back to a center radius. Be careful, because I need to have a diameter based circle, because when I type in 0.889 and hit enter, if it goes too big and it's the outside of the part, you know that you need to go back here to the beginning and try it again. So my drawing is pretty well done. Pretty amazing that it didn't take very long to create this shape. So let's talk a little bit about some text editing and how to create dimensions. Well, we've got dimensions here. We've got linear, aligned, angular. Those are the three linear style dimensions, except for the angular. When we have an angled surface, we want to dimension that. Arc length's kind of interesting to get the distance of an arc along a curve. That's the linear distance of an arc along the curve. Radius and diameter dimensions. So let's start off with diameter dimension. And to keep it easy, we're going to go ahead and put this one up out over here. And we've got some radius dimensions that we also need to make. So let's go ahead and choose radius. And so we have to have a radius dimension here. Repeat radius. So I've got all the radius dimensioned. And we also need to remember that I have linear dimensions also. I need to dimension this vertical distance. I need to dimension the horizontal distance to the center line. I need to dimension the center distance between. And you'll notice that I'm picking the ends of the extension lines. Now, when you look at the drawing, you'll also see that this 0.889 dimension has a 3x in front of it. Well, one of the cool things is that I can double click, and once I double click, I can type in 3 capital X, and if I have to put spaces in, I can use the arrow keys to locate the spaces. When I'm finished, I can choose the close editor up at the top, or I can choose escape, but I always like choosing the close editor because it gives me a little bit of finality. So there's 3 of these circles. All the other ones are unique. One of the big ones got the height dimensions, got the 2 width dimensions. It looks complete. Have a great day.